All right, everyone, it's that time again already. Time for another top 10 of the 1970s. I've done 1979, 8, and 7. Now we're doing the top 10 of 1976. I've seen 42 movies from this year, a lot of first time watches, and a couple of surprises, and there's a lot of religious horror movies now. I think we're getting into that era of the 70s where there's going to be a lot of satanic and cult movies. This year had quite a few of them, and this was the first year, I believe, where Stephen King had a movie. So Carrie, I believe, was the first Stephen King movie. And there was a lot of slow burns this year as well. A lot of longer films, close to 2 hours. But overall, I would say 1976 is a better year than 1977 and maybe even 1978. I mean, yeah, you had Halloween in 1978. There's no masterpiece to me in 1976, but there's a lot of great movies this year. So, 1976, we're going to not only do my top 10, but we're also going to I'm going to give you 3 dishonorable mentions and 3 honorable mentions and shout out some other movies towards the end that are worth watching and checking out that didn't make my list. So stick around. So let's jump into my 3 dishonorable mentions real quick. The 3 worst movies from this year that I saw. First up is a movie called Dark August, a boring melodramatic supernatural revenge movie that's so stagnant and dull. Hardly anything happens in this movie, and when shit does start to happen, it is so short-lived. I feel like the whole last act of this movie is just a seance where nothing creepy or spooky happens, and then the chick's just gunned down. This movie has an Italian-like sounding synth score that's repetitive as hell and just really got on my nerves. The main couple in this movie I did not care for. They just have bad chemistry and awful dialogue. And this evil person, this evil force that's stalking our protagonist is just some hooded brown robe wearing figure that doesn't ever move or make a sound. The acting is average at best, and the only blood you're going to get in this movie is when some guy cuts his leg, and it's like that really bad, bright red blood that's so fake. There's a moment in this movie where the main guy says he's 39, but then later on he says he's 38. So is he lying, or is it just bad script continuity? And at the very end of the film, I swear to God, there's just some crew member walking around in the background. Did they not see that? Was that guy supposed to be there? It's just a poorly made movie. Next dishonorable mention will be Drive-In Massacre. This movie is terrible in so many ways, from the acting to the mostly dull dialogue, color correction issues, and its slow pace. It's a somewhat cheesy movie with a great setting. I like the drive-in setting. You got a couple of gory sword kills and a cameo by George Buckflower, who is also the writer of this movie, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know he was a writer. It's only a 75-minute movie, but boy, does it feel like it's 2 hours long. This movie pads the runtime with like this carnival scene where one of the red herrings goes to this carnival and it's just walking around, and we just hear him repeating dialogue from earlier in the film in his head, and the whole scene really has no purpose to be in the film. Then the majority of the whole third act is at this warehouse where George Buckflower has kidnapped some girl. We've never met these people before, and he's just chasing this girl around a warehouse for what feels like forever, and it has no connection to what the fuck's happening at the drive-in. And what bugged me more was that when they save this little brat from George Buckflower, she shows no gratitude. After the great opening kill, we are introduced to our main 2 characters, which are these 2 overweight, middle-aged detectives who have really long interrogation scenes with every character. Like, there's just so many scenes that go on for so long, and none of the dialogue is interesting. This movie is just poorly directed, poorly lit in some scenes where you can't see shit, and the music, the soundtrack is just so horrible, it gets on your nerves. And if you hated the ending of Black Christmas because you never found out who the killer was, well, guess what? That's what you get here. No name, no face, no motive. And what I found funny is that despite how many days in a row there are brutal murders at this drive-in every day, this place is jam-packed with cars. Like, Sure, everyone's getting slaughtered here every day. It's in the newspapers. Everybody knows about it. But everyone's just like, well, this movie is so amazing. We gotta go see it. Yeah, we might get killed with a sword, but let's just go see this movie anyways. And final dishonorable mention will be a very shitty film called Track of the Moon Beast. The only thing that could have made this shitty film better is if the Moon Beast moonwalked. The acting in this movie is so horrendously awful, and the ending just shows that all the money, what little money they had, just went towards these shitty optical effects that make no sense. The transformation scene where the guy turns into the moon beast is like done in a way where it's like crossfade transitions, like going from one stage of makeup to the next, like it's just fading to the next stage again and again. Just very low budget filmmaking. There's just literally nothing here that's worth watching for. Like nothing. There's no suspense, no atmosphere, no gore, no kills, really, that I can remember. No nudity, nothing. There's no scares, there's nothing in this that was like funny, bad. Just bad filmmaking. That's all it is. It's not bad filmmaking that's funny, it's just bad. All right, now let's jump into my top 10. Let's talk about some good movies. Number 10 will be Alice, Sweet Alice. This is a religious-themed murder mystery that could have been great with better acting, more kills, and a tighter pace. I like that the identity of the killer wasn't so predictable. It actually surprised me, but I feel like it's revealed a little too early. I wish they would have kept the mystery alive a little bit longer in the movie. I thought the score of this film was incredible, and I really liked the look of the killer, the raincoat, and the translucent girl's face. This is like a proto slasher, so you're not going to get like a lot of gore, high body count, but at least they had the balls to strangle a kid and then light the kid on fire. And that kid just so happens to be Brooke Shields. I think the open is good. The finale is solid. It's just the middle that's a bit over dramatic, leisurely paced. If the middle was better, this movie would be higher up. But still a good movie worth checking out. And shout out to Horror House, who chose this as their favorite movie. Number 9 will go to another religious horror film called To the Devil a Daughter. This is a satanic cult film that moves at a good pace and stars the great Christopher Lee and Richard Widmark. This also stars the German actress from Cat People, who is easily the weakest actor in this film. I thought the story was interesting. It's a bit hard to follow at first. You got like this devil baby thing later on. There's some cheesy moments for sure. Like one guy is lit on fire and 2 seconds later he's just a pile of ashes, which made me chuckle. I will say that the ending of this movie though feels rather rushed and quite easy for our protagonist to defeat the antagonist in this movie. It just felt very rushed, and it has some really jarring, trippy visuals, like what they do with the colors, like the grass turns purple. And I guess devil worshipping is really good for your skin because Christopher Lee doesn't age a day when this movie jumps forward in time 20 years. I did notice a weird moment of like muffled gunshots, like the sound design was weird. There was some camera shadows I saw, but overall I still think this movie was well shot and still an enjoyable film. Number 8 goes to a movie from the director of Just Before Dawn, and that is Squirm. This is a killer worm movie that delivers a plethora of worms that apparently can scream and knock over trees. The lead couple in this movie I really like. They carry the film for me, and they're just sweet, young, innocent, and they have really good like humorous dialogue. There's one line that cracked me up where he's like, 2 corpses in one day, next time you come visit me. There's a really good effect of like a worm like digging itself into like the guy's face. It's like eating its way through his cheek and it's going underneath the skin. Like that's a really cool effect. And there's some cool creepy sequences with that character later on in the third act. And the acting overall isn't that great, but it's not terrible. I love that they actually show the whole town getting attacked by these worms. I was worried it was just going to be like one setting the whole time, but we actually get to see these worms attack like the local jail, the club, the bar, whatever. So we get to see a lot more attack scenes than I was expecting. I feel like they missed an opportunity to show a really like gruesome death with one character, the skeptical cop, who's kind of like an antagonist. He's mean to the main character, but his death is off camera, so that was a missed opportunity. They should have showed him and that girl he was with at the jail cell die on camera and get eaten alive. And the infight between the two guys could have been extended, more intense, but I love that we get to see this guy drown in a sea of worms. I thought that was a great visual. This movie is unfortunately PG. I feel like that kind of hurts it. This movie could have been even better if it was rated R and we got to see some like gory kills with worms just filling people up and then like coming out of their eyes or some shit. Like, think of the end of Creep Show, that last segment. If we got some of that shit in this movie with worms, that would have definitely been cool. And shout out to Bobby Carlos, who chose this as his favorite. Number 7 comes from a controversial director, and that is Roman Polanski's The Tenant. This is a slow burn psychological movie that stars the director himself, Roman Polanski, in the lead role. And that's really where one of my main issues is him in the lead role. Like, I don't think he's that great of an actor. If you had a fantastic actor in this lead role, this movie would be a lot better. But I love the third act. It gets increasingly crazy, and the movie ends on a bit of a head scratcher, so it makes you want to go back and watch the movie again. I feel like this is a movie that needs multiple watches to fully understand everything that's going on. There are some unintentionally funny moments in this movie, like when Roman Polanski goes up to this little kid in the park who's crying and says, you filthy little brat, and slaps him across the face. I lost my shit. But that's not the worst thing he's ever done to a minor. It's a beautifully shot movie, and there's some really creepy moments, especially when you see like a severed head being tossed up in front of his window at night again and again, like a volleyball just flying up in front of his window. Could you imagine seeing that outside your window at night? Another thing that kind of hurt the film, it was distracting, was some of the dubbed acting. Some of it was pretty bad. Number 6 goes to a movie that's probably the biggest surprise of the year. I did not expect this to make my top 10 at all, and that is Mansion of the Doomed. From Michael Pataki in Full Moon Pictures comes a shockingly disturbing, eye-popping film about guilt. This movie stars Lance Henriksen and also has some effects done by the incredible Stan Winston. And despite the low budget this movie clearly had, Stan Winston pulls off some creepy effective effects with these eyeless victims just walking around this dark dungeon basement. Like, the imagery in this film was unsettling. Another thing that was unsettling about this movie was that scene at the park with the main doctor and the little kid. I wasn't sure if they were going to go there because you know what his intentions are. So that scene just had me on the edge of my seat. And I love the poetic ending of this film. What happens to the main doctor? Justice was served. I feel like there should have been more scenes in this movie with the main doctor and his daughter. There should have been more scenes between them, and there should have been more of an investigation going on. The second act of the film is a bit tedious, and the transfer I saw on Tubi was dreadful. So that kind of hurt the experience, but I still really enjoyed it. But just know that there is only right now a terrible transfer on Tubi. But if you can look past the awful dark transfer, this movie has some really good things going for it. Number 5 goes to a movie I just watched before this recording, the last movie I checked out, and that is Who Can Kill a Child? This is a Spanish Children of the Corn, basically, set in a ghost town on an island. Now, of course, this movie came out way before Children of the Corn, but I have to wonder if Stephen King was inspired by this movie, because it's essentially the same thing. The opening 10 minutes of this movie are really shocking. It's just footage of actual children in like war and suffering from not only war, but disease and hunger, just actual really shocking, disturbing footage. And what makes it extra effective is the creepy kids singing like over it. The score of the film is just like children singing and humming over it, which was really good. I like the soundtrack of the film. I like the main couple in the movie, although I don't agree with all their decision making. And you get to see multiple kids get shot and beat over the head with like an oar, which just made me crack up for some reason because I'm sick. I was just having a good time chuckling at the sight of all these kids getting butchered by the by the main guy. who can kill a child? This guy can. But hey, they pushed him. You know what they do with his pregnant wife? It was surprising. I didn't see that scene coming. And it really hints at some supernatural things happen. Like there has to be some supernatural stuff happening here. At least one or two of these kids are supernatural, and the director does a good job of making these children look creepy. Like I just love the way they stare at the lead couple from afar in like huge groups. So it's like a believable threat. There's so many of them, and that human pinata scene was great. Number 4 goes to a movie that some people don't consider to be horror, but I'm counting it, and that is The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane. This is a suspenseful horror thriller with terrific performances from Jodie Foster, who's only 13, and Martin Sheen, who is a creepy, intrusive pedophile. I like the boyfriend character in this movie, the actor from Return to Horror High, and I thought he was an interesting character, but a bit hard to believe that he would be so quickly on board with everything that's going on. The movie has a really good flow. I like the classical piano score. It's a bit Italian sounding at times as well. But the highlight of the film is the performances. Jodie Foster is absolutely phenomenal in this. And was that a body double? I didn't look into it, but Jodie Foster is 13 playing a 13-year-old, and she gets fully nude in this movie. We see her ass, and she gets in bed with a guy and then fucks him. Like, we don't see it happen, but she has sex with this guy. She's 13. Was that her? Was that her, like, sister? Was it a body double? The ending is good, and they kind of leave some things ambiguous, like the fate of her boyfriend and Mario, and what's going to happen with this investigation. Like, is she really in the clear? Also, the accidental death of Mrs. Hallett was like unintentionally funny to me and so convenient. Number 3 comes from the director of Trilogy of Terror, Dan Curtis, and this movie is Burnt Offerings. This is a supernatural house film that seems to have influenced Amityville, Evil Dead, and The Shining. This movie has a really strong cast. Not only do you have like Burgess Meredith in the opening, but you got Oliver Reed, who plays the husband, and then you got Karen Black playing the wife, who both give terrific performances. The nightmares in this movie involving the chauffeur were creepy as hell. I love that there's just a sense of dread from the beginning. Just the music, them just driving up to the house, something's off about it right away. And also, despite it being a slow burn, I was never really bored. Now, I did think that the acting from the aunt when she was being like very dramatic wasn't really that good. She's a famous actress. She's done plenty of things, but I just thought she wasn't that strong in this film. And also that freeze frame zoom in shot towards the end was just unnecessary. I thought the atmosphere was great. I loved the mansion setting, and the third act was pretty intense because I actually cared for the family. They're set up well as a relatable, loving family, and then there's some really good tension between them as the movie progresses. Now, the ending I didn't fully understand, but it's interesting. And again, reminded me of The Shining with all the pictures and how it ends just zooming in on a picture. There's a lot of stuff in here that reminded me of other films. Like there's even a scene where the trees are attacking them, like in Evil Dead. And shout out to Steve Carney, who chose this as his favorite. Number 2 goes to a Brian De Palma film, a Stephen King film, and that is Carrie. This is a beautifully shot, stylistic film, and one of the best films dealing with telekinesis. This movie has an outstanding cast and just phenomenal performances by Piper Laurie and Sissy Spacek. This movie has Brian De Palma written all over it. It's got all of his signature shots, his style, the split screen, the split diopter lens shots. It's a beautifully shot film. And the prom scene is iconic and easily the best part of the movie. I've heard some people criticize that this movie's score is very much a Psycho ripoff, but I love that it sounds like Psycho. Pino Donaggio is obviously paying tribute to that film and Bernard Herrmann, and I love it. It works for this movie, so I don't mind it. And this movie does move at a good pace, so one has to wonder why Brian De Palma felt it was necessary to fast forward for 2 seconds during that one scene where they're getting tuxedos and shit. That scene is so jarring, and I don't like that decision. What was up with that edit? I also don't like how long that shot goes around them when they're dancing. It goes on for like 2 minutes, and I literally get so dizzy by the end of it. I just want to like fall off my couch. I also don't like how quickly Chris and John Travolta are killed in this movie. It was like as if they weren't big, important characters. Like they were just nobody. Like they deserved a bigger, like more vicious demise. The mom's kill though is great. It's very symbolic and just I love how that's done. And the ending scare, although it feels very tacked on, is very iconic as well. It is basically what influenced Friday the 13th, I read. And there's no way she's too young to remember what happened. I think that line is laughable. What doctor would say that a 17, 18-year-old chick is not going to remember what happened at prom? It's not like she's 4. She's going to remember that night for the rest of her life. And shout outs to Mikey, Royce Bunn, Liam 03, Victor Peterson, Carrie Benjamin Portway, Mike Hatfill, Aiden Vavra, and T.O. Martin, who chose this as their favorite. Now, before we get to my number one, which will probably be obvious, let's talk about a few honorable mentions. These movies just missed the list, and we will start with Grizzly. This is one of those movies that came out right after Jaws that feels very similar to that movie in its like story structure. You got the one guy who doesn't believe that there's really a bear out there, and then you got the 3 male characters that are similar to like Brody, Quint, and Hooper. One of them's like an authority figure, like a cop, and this one's like a park ranger or something. And then you got like the animal expert, and the hunter. Like these 3 characters are basically those 3 characters from Jaws. Where this movie succeeds is in its cheesiness, the amount of attack scenes we get in the first half, and that explosive finale like Jaws. I love that in this movie the grizzly can whack the limbs off of people and even the head off of a horse, which cracked me up the first time, and even take down a watchtower very easily. Just like in Jaws, we got a lot of POV shots of the animal going through the forest, and there's some inconsistent shots of the legs where the fur changes color, like the bear's black, and then in some shots the bear's legs are brown, so it's like they were using 2 separate bears. The first half of this movie does provide a huge body count, and one park ranger lady, when they're out looking for this killer grizzly, just decides that she's going to randomly strip down and skinny dip all by herself, and then she's killed, and no one ever seems to notice throughout the rest of the film. I really like Christopher George and Andrew Pine. I think they're good actors, but unfortunately I don't think the dialogue in this movie is very good, and I don't like the female character, the love interest. I don't think her character was very interesting. The chemistry between her and Christopher George, I just wasn't into them, and I thought she was also just kind of a weak actress. I think what this movie really needed, I still enjoy it, but I think this movie could have been way better if they just developed these 3 main male characters better and had improved dialogue. And shout outs to Phil Smith and the Horror Master, who chose this as their favorite. Second honorable mention will go to a film starring the final girl from Friday the 13th, the final chapter, Kimberly Beck. This movie is called Massacre at Central High. This is a political social commentary film that feels a bit like Class of 1984 and is not a slasher like the title may suggest. There's a lot of kills though in this movie, and some of them are unintentionally funny. The explosive locker, the guy diving into a drained pool, the guy hang gliding and falls onto the electrical wires. So that stuff was pretty good. It made me laugh. The acting isn't very good, and the ending could have been much better. And make more sense if they had developed some of these characters more, especially the guy getting revenge and his relationship with Kimberly Beck's character. It's a short movie that runs at a good pace, but I had a bit of a hard time buying this guy's transition into evil, like, school bomber getting revenge, and like I understand he wants revenge because they fucked up his leg, but I don't feel like they did enough to justify what he does back to them. I just think they should have done way more to his character to make him want to go to that extreme. Like, all they did was give him a slight limp in his leg. It's not like they fucked up his chance for a football scholarship or something. He wasn't an athlete or anything. He was just like a car mechanic. So, I don't know, I didn't buy it, and I didn't really buy his sacrifice at the end. And also, what kind of hurt my experience of this movie was how dark the transfer was on YouTube. This does have a Blu-ray now, but what I saw was so pitch black, especially at night. But I still really enjoyed it. I'm a sucker for revenge movies. I liked seeing him pick off these bullies, and then all the nerds at the school became the new bullies, so he had to start picking them off too. Like, I liked the concept here. It's short, runs at a good pace, and it's definitely worth checking out. Final honorable mention will go to The Town That Dreaded Sundown. This is an interesting, based on a true story movie that features a scary looking sackhead phantom killer. I love the trombone kill in this movie. It's both iconic and very unique. And I do think that the highlights of this movie are every scene with the Phantom in it. Every time he's on the screen, I really enjoy the movie. I just love the look, the sackhead look. I think it's even more terrifying looking than the sackhead look in Friday the 13th Part 2, which they obviously had influence from this movie when making that. But yeah, every scene with him is great. And I love the 40s era backdrop to the film, how they really capture that look and feel of the 1940s in here with, the hairstyles and the costume designs and all the cars that they're driving. Like, they do a really good job. It feels like a bigger budget movie than it probably is. Now, what hurts this movie for me is the odd tone. You got some bumbling idiot cops who are just so cringy, and they like throw in this like scenario where they have to dress up like girls, and it's just so bad. Plus, there's some filmmaking errors here, like visible crew and some bad choppy audio editing and day for night shooting, stuff like that just kind of takes you out of it. I do like a couple of the characters though. I like Andrew Pine in this movie from Grizzly, and the Terror Train guy. He's in this movie as like the sheriff. I thought they were good actors in this, and I like the end chase scene, and I like the documentary feel of the film. I also have a full review of this movie already on my channel, and a review for the remake slash sequel, whatever you want to call it, from 2014. So if you want to hear all my thoughts on this movie and the remake, sequel, whatever, go check out those reviews. Number 1 goes to The Omen. This is a evil child and satanic cult film that's effective at being ominous and gripping. Richard Donner, rest in peace, his direction in this movie is magnificent, and each kill in this movie to me is iconic and indelible. It has not only the best hanging in a film ever, but it also has one of the best decapitations ever put on film. I thought it was smart to not feature the kid Damien in the movie so much, because it's hard to get a good performance from a kid actor. They use him just enough, and they do get some creepy moments from him. Gregory Peck and David Warner are great actors, and the actress who plays the nanny also gives a really creepy performance, and she just has this look where you can just tell she's not to be trusted. It has a really good atmosphere, and what makes this movie extra scary to me is Jerry Goldsmith's amazing, scary, intense score. Now, it is kind of a longer movie. It's close to 2 hours long, but it only starts to slow down really in the second half once the investigation starts. And I must admit that the graveyard scene, despite how intense it is with the dogs and everything, I like the look of it. But you can tell that it's a soundstage, and you can even see 3 crew members in one of the shots. And also, one misstep in this movie was that awful burn makeup effect on that guy's face. It looks bad. It's really silly looking, and they didn't need to do that. If you're not going to have good makeup effects on that guy's face, don't show it at all. I'm a big fan of Final Destination 3, so seeing these foreshadowing photos in here I thought was great. It was eerie, and it makes you wonder if they're meant to be like a warning from the devil, or if they're meant to be like help from God, like God's trying to help them avoid their demise. And shout out to Paul B. and Jonathan Lopez, who chose this as their favorite. Now, before I go, I'm going to do some shout outs to other movies that didn't make the list that might be worth checking out. Schizo. A recently married woman who has been labeled as mentally unstable begins to suspect that someone close to her is the culprit in a sudden string of murders. God told me to. A New York detective investigates a series of murders committed by random New Yorkers who claim that God told them to. Island of Death. A British couple on a small Greek island spread terror beyond anything the islanders could have ever imagined. The Witch Who Came from the Sea. Anger stemming from being abused as a child drives an alcoholic's daughter to kill as an adult. House on Straw Hill. A paranoid writer is unable to get started on his second novel, so he hires a secretary and then his trouble really begins. JD's Revenge. Murdered on Bourbon Street in 1942, New Orleans, a gangster returns from the dead 34 years later possessing the body of a young black law student in his quest for revenge. And lastly, Eaten Alive by Tobe Hooper. A psychotic redneck who owns a dilapidated hotel in the backwater swamps of Louisiana kills various people who upset him or his business, and feeds them to his large crocodile. So there you have it. That is my top 10 of 1976, plus many honorable mentions, films to check out, in 3 shitty films that you should never check out. Let me know what your top 10 is in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you've seen here, you can hit this like button and become a subscriber today just by clicking on my cartoon face in about 5 seconds. And remember, it's all an opinion. You don't need to get butthurt about it.